Kash Patel cracked a joke on live TV expecting laughs, but Jasmine Crockett's stunning response left him speechless and the audience in complete shock. The lights went up too fast. Not the soft fade television usually favors. It was harsh, sudden, like truth didn't have time to warm up. Jasmine Crockett sat still under the brightness, her expression calm but set. Powder blue blazer. No notes, no nerves, just presence. Stage left. Kash Patel sat to the right, already grinning. Not the friendly kind. The kind you wear when you think the cameras are your mirror. He adjusted his tie twice in 10 seconds. Someone backstage whispered, "Here we go." The hosta man with a jawline made for politics and a voice made for disclaimers looked directly into the camera. Tonight, a special edition panel, Truth, National Security, and Political Accountability in America. He smiled. Wide. Performed. The crowd gave polite applause, that manufactured ripple of sound that says nothing except we're watching. The screen cut briefly to a wide shot. The audience looked attentive, neutral. But if you looked close, some leaned forward not for entertainment, but because they sensed something was about to crack. The host turned to Kash first. Joining us is Kash Patel, former Chief of Staff to the Acting Secretary of Defense and frequent contributor to national security discussions. Kash nodded, gave a practiced smirk, adjusted his cuff like the spotlight was old fabric he was comfortable in. Then, to Jasmine. And Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, Texas Democrat, rising voice on Capitol Hill, and a spirited participant in oversight hearings. She didn't flinch, but her eyebrow lifted just slightly. Spirited. The word wasn't neutral. It was the professional man's version of feisty. She knew that tone. She'd lived in it. She leaned forward, hands folded. "Glad to be here," she said. Steady, low, clear. The panel began. The host shuffled his cards, eyes flicking between them like he was waiting for sparks. Not conversation, conflict. It was framed as a discussion, but everyone watching could feel it already. This wasn't dialogue. It was a chess match dressed like Sunday talk. And Jasmine didn't come to perform. She came to finish what people like Patel kept pretending wasn't broken. She didn't need to raise her voice. Not yet. The first question went to Kash. Not a surprise, but not a small thing either. "Mr. Patel, there's been a lot of talk about government overreach and the weaponization of intelligence agencies. What's your view on where we stand?" Kash leaned back, relaxed, like he was already on home turf. The cameras loved him, he knew it. He gave them angles, sound bites, said deep state by the second sentence. Threw in patriot, witch hunt, and political theater like seasoning. The host nodded through it, almost encouraged it. When it was Jasmine's turn, the tone shifted. "And Congresswoman," the host said, his voice dipping an octave into something almost theatrical, "you've been vocal in recent hearings. Some would say fiery. What do you think your role is in balancing these partisan concerns?" Vocal, fiery, spirited. The trifecta. Jasmine didn't blink, but her posture shifted, slightly straighter, like steel settling under pressure. She answered slowly, calmly. She used numbers, dates, specific language. But the host cut in before she could finish the second point. "Right, but do you feel that your tone?" She tilted her head, just enough for the camera to catch it. "My tone?" she asked. "Or my position?" The audience caught it. A murmur rolled through the seats like a change in weather. Patel chuckled, quiet but calculated. "This is what I mean," he said. "Everything's always personal, always performative." She turned to him, calm as ever. "You're right," she said. "It is personal, because when people like you deflect from facts, real people pay the price." The host cleared his throat, pivoted, tried to move on, but the imbalance had already stained the air. They gave Patel space to speculate. They gave Jasmine seconds to explain. They let him speak uninterrupted. They watched her like she was seconds from snapping. And still she didn't raise her voice. Still she kept her hands folded. Still she stayed colder than anyone expected. That's what unsettled them the most. She wasn't rattled. She was ready. And they had no idea how deep that readiness ran. Kash Patel smiled like a man with a knife under the table. "I mean, I get it," he said, gesturing loosely toward Jasmine. "You come from a district where yelling gets you more likes than legislation. It's politics as performance volume over value." The crowd chuckled. A few clapped. Not loudly, but enough. Jasmine didn't blink, She watched him like you watch a man hanging himself with a rope he thinks is velvet. Patel kept going. Look, I'm not here to insult anyone. I'm just saying when your platform is built on outrage and not outcomes, well, it shows. He leaned back, proud of himself. The host didn't interrupt. He smiled, sipped water, let it breathe, gave it space. Jasmine inhaled once, then stilled. Her hands remained folded in her lap. She looked neither amused nor insulted. Just present, watching. Kash thought he'd landed a punch, but Jasmine knew this move, knew it down to the syllables. Paint her as angry, paint her as empty, frame her intellect as noise. It wasn't strategy. It was muscle memory for people like him. She waited. The host turned to her, a performative blink of balance. Congresswoman? A single word, no question. Just an open invitation for her to react to confirm the caricature. But Jasmine wasn't there for that. She didn't need to defend herself. Her resume did that, her record, her math. Instead, she spoke with the quiet steadiness of someone holding a loaded file and the patience to wait until it mattered. I represent a district that's been underfunded, over-policed, and left out of policy rooms for decades, she said, her voice measured. If raising my voice puts that back on the national radar, I'll take that trade every time. Then she paused. But if you'd read the legislation I've authored, any of it, you'd know it's not just volume, it's substance. The air stilled. That wasn't fire, that was precision, and Patel didn't like it. He shifted in his seat. The smile thinned. But Jasmine? She leaned back, still calm, still folded. This wasn't her strike. This was just her reminding him. She came studied, and she knew exactly what kind of fight this really was. The laugh came from the third row, too loud, too eager, like someone was waiting for permission. Then another. Then a clap, not full applause, just enough to signal alignment. The smirks followed. One man in the back nodded slowly, arms crossed. The kind of body language that says, yeah, show her. Jasmine saw it all. She saw the rhythm, the choreography. Say she's loud. Wait for the chuckles. Let the crowd do the rest. It wasn't improvisation. It was a script. One she'd watched 100 times before, different rooms, different faces, same trap. Across from her, Patel basked in the response. He wasn't subtle. He was smug, tapping his pen like it was a gavel, like he'd already won. The moderator glanced her way, then looked down, pretended to shuffle cards. He wasn't neutral. He was absent. His silence wasn't oversight, it was strategy. Let it play out. Let her take the bait. But Jasmine didn't. She folded her hands, gave a soft nod. Not an agreement, just acknowledgement. I see what this is. The camera caught her profile. Calm, unmoved. That silence wasn't retreat, it was loaded restraint. And the audience felt it. Because the laughter didn't last. It faltered, edged into discomfort. A woman in the second row frowned. Someone else stopped clapping halfway through. People started to notice the pattern. Who got to joke? Who got to justify? Who had to explain? Who was called spirited and who was called expert? And Jasmine didn't say a word to call it out. She didn't have to. Her stillness was a mirror, one the audience wasn't ready for. She looked toward the host again. He was already avoiding her gaze. The power had shifted quietly, subtle, but it had shifted. Not because she shouted, because she didn't. And in that silence, a question rose in the room like smoke. What happens when the person you tried to corner doesn't flinch? Because she built the whole room first? The answer was coming. And when it did, it wouldn't be loud. It would be lethal. Kash leaned in, not casually, deliberately. He adjusted his mic, exhaled like he was the calm in the storm, then dropped it. Congresswoman, I hope you brought more than slogans tonight. It was said with a smile, but the kind that tastes like static. The audience reacted before she did. A low, tight chuckle from the same section that clapped earlier. Someone whispered wow under their breath, uncertain if it was admiration or warning. The host didn't intervene, just blinked slowly, waiting. Jasmine stayed still, not frozen, focused. She turned slightly, just enough to look Kash in the eye. Then she said it quiet, sharp, irreversible. I brought something you never had, facts with consequences. There was a pause. Half a second, maybe less. Then came the fracture. A few people in the audience gasped, not dramatic, not performative. Real, instinctual. One hand shot to a mouth. Another gripped the armrest a little tighter. Kash blinked. The moderator shifted in his seat. Someone backstage whispered, "Mark that clip." But Jasmine didn't smile. She didn't soften. She didn't gloat. Because that line wasn't a punchline. It was a warning. Kash tried to laugh it off. A low chuckle, nothing behind it. But the energy had already changed. The control he thought he had, the crowd, the pacing, the comfort was slipping. And Jasmine hadn't even moved her hands. She glanced down at the small notepad in front of her, untouched until now. Then, slowly, she opened it. One page, 3 lines. Not slogans. Receipts. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't gesture or glance at the camera. She just read. July 13, 2021. Fox News. You said the FBI fabricated evidence to justify surveillance on political opponents. Not speculation, your words. The IG report found no such fabrication. Page 117. Kash shifted. Jasmine turned the page. October 4, 2022. You claimed under oath that the National Archives never flagged any issues regarding classified material. We have the letter, dated May 10th, signed by the Archivist of the United States. The host leaned forward, eyes darting. One more page. March 2023, podcast interview. You claimed the DoD had cleared you of any impropriety during the transition. That report was classified, but 2 weeks later, you changed your story. Said you couldn't comment. So which is it? Kash opened his mouth, closed it, then opened it again louder this time. That's not, those quotes are taken out of context. But the moderator, for once, didn't rush in to save him. He was still reading the notes on his card, lips parted like he'd just seen the tide coming in too fast. Jasmine didn't react. She wasn't baiting him. She wasn't debating. She was documenting. Kash tried to laugh again. It came out wrong. This is what you came with? A printout of my interviews? She looked up, finally. Looked at him. No, I came with truth. Yours just happened to bring the rest. The crowd didn't clap. Not yet. They were still processing. Because this wasn't a takedown. It was an unmasking. And it was only just beginning. Kash Patel's smile cracked first. A flicker, quick, but visible. His cheek twitched, his eyes narrowed, not focused, defensive. Then came the deflection. You see what I mean? He said, gesturing vaguely toward Jasmine. This is what happens when emotion takes the wheel. Jasmine didn't move. She's not here for policy, he continued. She's here to grandstand. Perform. Another leftist with a soundbite and no substance. The words weren't for her. They were for the audience. The base. The algorithm. He said emotional like it was synonymous with irrational. He said combative like he hadn't thrown the first punch. He said grandstanding like she hadn't just dismantled 3 of his talking points in under 2 minutes. Jasmine stayed quiet. Not because she didn't have something to say, but because she knew when not to interrupt a man building his own gallows. The moderator cleared his throat uneasy. He glanced at Jasmine, unsure whether to move on or brace for impact. Kash kept going. Faster now. Edgy. Loud. Spinning his own narrative before the last one had even landed. You can't govern with feelings, he said. You can't legislate by vibes and viral clips. He was trying to reclaim the room, reclaim the power. But the more he spoke, the smaller he looked. And the bigger her silence became. Jasmine leaned back slightly, not checked out, anchored. She didn't reach for her water. She didn't adjust her notes. She let him talk. Because the trap wasn't hers. It was his. And he'd already stepped in it. The moderator turned, almost hesitant. Congresswoman, do you want to respond? Jasmine exhaled once, then adjusted her mic knot quickly, slowly, deliberately. She didn't look at Kash, she looked straight ahead. I'm not emotional, she said quietly. I'm exact. The room stilled. Then she began. On January 7, 2021, you defended the former president's inaction. You said there was nothing unusual about the delay in deploying the National Guard, but you were chief of staff to the DoD. You knew the timeline. You knew the damage. A shuffle in the audience. Subtle. A chair creaked. Someone shifted forward. Later that month, you pushed the false claim that the FBI had infiltrated the protesters. You said, quote, "We need to ask who lit the match." She looked at the moderator. They were wearing militia patches, carrying zip ties, and chanting for executions. The match was lit a long time ago. No yelling. No fire. Just precision. She kept going. In August, you claimed classified documents found at Mar-a-Lago were declassified by thought. The host blinked. She turned back to Kash, just for a second. Is that how national security works now? Telepathy? No one laughed. Because no one could. Jasmine straightened in her chair. Words have weight, but least specially your kind of aftershocks. Patel opened his mouth. But the moderator raised a hand, stopped him. The control had shifted again, and Jasmine hadn't raised her voice once. Jasmine didn't lean forward. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't point. She cut. The lie isn't just the words, she said, still calm. It's what the words are used to ignore. She glanced down at her note-zone page, neatly marked, then up again. There's a veteran in my district served in Iraq, arrested last year after being misidentified from January 6th footage circulated online. It wasn't him, but the system didn't slow down to ask. Kash shifted. Jasmine didn't look at him. She wasn't talking to him anymore. She was talking past him through the wall of noise he built, into the spaces where his words had consequences. The intelligence report you called a partisan fantasy last fall about domestic extremist threats in law enforcement? That report cited a Dallas field office. You remember that, right? My office got the calls. People asking if their neighbors were on a list, terrified, not because of lies they heard, but because of the ones you helped spread. Her voice never changed. It didn't waver. It didn't escalate. It was steady, like a heartbeat under pressure. She turned a page. There was a 19-year-old girl in Houston, Muslim. Targeted online after your podcast interview last year pushed the narrative that DHS was hiding foreign threats inside sanctuary cities. She didn't sleep for a week. Her parents pulled her out of school. The room didn't flinch. It froze. These aren't sound bites. They're scars, left behind by men who play with paranoia like it's politics. She set the paper down, folded her hands again, then looked directly at the camera. And when people like you, comfortable, credentialed, pretend that disinformation is just a strategy, you forget there are people out here living in its wreckage. Not a shout. Not a clapback. A scalpel. And it sliced clean. The studio didn't breathe. Not at first. No camera movement, no rustle of notes. Just silence, thick, sharp-edged, and involuntary. Even the crowd, once loose with laughter and soft applause, had stiffened. A woman in the third row mouthed the word wow, like she didn't know she was doing it out loud. A man near the aisle dropped his phone trying to record. No one looked at Kash. Because he wasn't the center anymore. Jasmine was. And she wasn't leaning in to take it. She was standing still and watching it come to her. The moderator tried to speak. Opened his mouth. Looked down at his cue cards. Lost. This wasn't the panel he thought he was hosting. This wasn't punditry. It was something closer to reckoning. Jasmine didn't push further. Didn't pile on, that wasn't the point. She let the silence do the echoing. And that, more than any line, landed hardest. Because the audience wasn't just witnessing something. They were feeling it deep in the chest, under the skin. The shift, the power flipping sides, but without noise, without fire. Just clarity. Even the stage crew in the wings had stopped moving. One tech whispered to another, "Are we live right now?" The other nodded, wide-eyed. On set, Patel finally cleared his throat. But it was Jasmine's mic that carried the room now. Still. Ready. Still. In control. Still. Unshaken. The moderator blinked again, looked at the camera. He was supposed to wrap the segment. But no one was ready to move on. Because for the first time tonight, the truth wasn't framed. It was just spoken. Kash tried to pivot. "I think we're missing the forest for the trees," he said, voice tight. "She's twisting my words. That's not what I said, not what I meant." But no one interrupted her, and no one interrupted him either. That made it worse. "You know how this works," he added, now leaning forward, his palms open. "Say something reasonable, get spun into a villain. The media eats it up." He looked at the host for help. The host didn't move. "Come on," Kash said, laughing now, but the wrong kind, sharp, dry, defensive. "This is the game. You take one quote, strip it of nuance, turn it into a gotcha. Classic spin." But his voice was different now, higher, faster. The grip was slipping. Jasmine didn't move, didn't blink. She just waited. He felt it. And then it came the mistake. The thing he couldn't walk back. "You know what? People like you always make things about race and drama." Silence. Not the kind that feels awkward. The kind that feels final. The audience froze. The host blinked, then dropped his eyes like a man who wanted to disappear into the floor. A woman near the front gasped, hands to her mouth. Even the sound tech backstage stopped breathing. Because that sentence wasn't a dog whistle. It was a grenade, pulled live, on air, in front of an entire nation. Jasmine didn't react. Not yet. She waited. Let the moment rot in the space between them. Let Kash feel it. She didn't need to strike. She needed only one sentence. And when it landed, it wouldn't just cut. It would leave a crater. She waited longer than he expected. 2 seconds. Then 3. No response, no eye roll, no laugh. Just stillness. Then, finally, Jasmine turned to him. Not dramatically. Just enough to make the moment personal. People like me? She said quietly. Then came the drop. No, people like me are the reason people like you don't get away with this anymore. It landed like a gavel. Not loud. Heavy. Final. A woman in the audience exhaled audibly like she'd been holding her breath for years. Someone clapped once, then stopped. Then the room shifted not into applause, but into reverence. That rare silence that only truth can earn. Patel's mouth opened. Nothing came out. His face twitched not in anger, but in recognition. He knew it. This wasn't a segment anymore. It was a reckoning. Jasmine turned back to the moderator, who still hadn't lifted his head. She didn't press, didn't explain, because the sentence stood on its own. A line written not in pettiness but history, not in anger but authority. And in that moment, she wasn't debating. She was correcting. And no one, not Patel, not the host, not the audience, would forget how it sounded. Not today. Not ever. She could have stopped there. She had already won the moment, the room, the silence. But Jasmine wasn't here for moments. She was here for memory. So she adjusted her mic again, slow and precise, and gave them the final cut. Let's be clear, she said. This isn't personal. This is about power and who's terrified of losing it. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't blink. Then she did something they didn't expect. She named names. She listed former officials who had misused clearance to shield conspiracy. Cited a bill Patel once ghostwrote language for. Quoted from actual legal filings, not from Twitter threads or podcasts, but from court records, from history. She gave dates, case numbers. Laid it out like a prosecutor. Unemotional. Unapologetic. And while you sit here performing outrage, she added, her voice low but steady, there are Americans, veterans, immigrants, working mothers who are losing homes, losing jobs, losing faith. Because men like you turn real crises into campaign fodder. She looked directly into the camera then. No smile, no pitch, just the weight of truth, delivered with surgical grace. You don't have to agree with me, she said, eyes locked on the lens. But you should understand that accountability doesn't always shout. Sometimes, it sits calmly across from you and waits. She leaned back, done. Not dropped mic. Just placed it gently on the table. Like a final piece in a puzzle only she could finish. And no one breathed. The moderator looked stunned, cue cards in hand, but nothing on them made sense anymore. He cleared his throat, tried to pivot. Well, on that note, let's thank our panelists for, but it was too late. The moment was already gone, claimed. Not by applause, but by silence. Something deeper, heavier. A stillness that followed weight. People didn't cheer, they stared. Phones were raised, but not for likes, for evidence. For memory. A man in the second row whispered, "Did you hear that?" Someone else just nodded. Slow, respectful, wrecked. And Kash? He sat stiff, shoulders square, but soul unraveling. He didn't fidget, he froze, because there was nothing left to say. The energy he'd weaponized earlier, the smug confidence, the clapping, the quipshad turned against him. Now it was a mirror, and he was the only one looking in it. The host tried again. Thank you to both of our... But Jasmine was already adjusting her notes, calmly gathering her things. Not rushing, just ready. The credits would roll. But what came next? That wouldn't be in the script. It would be in the headlines. In the rewinds. In the words no one could unhear. And Kash knew it. He hadn't just lost the segment. He'd lost the room. The segment ended without music. Just a cut to black. The studio lights dimmed. The audience stayed seated longer than expected. Some still recording, some still stunned. One man whispered to his wife, "That wasn't just TV." It wasn't. By the time Jasmine reached the hallway, a young production assistant ran past her, phone in hand. "It's already up," she whispered, not making eye contact. Jasmine didn't ask what it was. She knew. 22 seconds. That's all it took. A clip grainy, vertical, caught by someone in the third row. It started at Patel's line, "People like you always make things about race and drama." Then cut to Jasmine. Her pause. Her sentence. The one they'd already started quoting in real time. "People like me are the reason people like you don't get away with this anymore." Then, silence. Patel frozen. The audience hushed. The moderator blinking like he'd forgotten his name. That was the video. No graphics, no music, just the sound of one power structure splintering. By the time she reached her car, it had crossed 300. 0 views. By the time she took off her blazer, it was over 2 million. By midnight, CNN ran the headline. Crockett didn't clap back, she dismantled. MSNBC. The mic wasn't dropped. It was taken. Fox? They called it a meltdown. But even their clip blurred Patel's face for a moment too long, like the camera couldn't decide where the damage landed. On TikTok, the line was already layered over music: Beyoncé, Kendrick, Nina Simone. Cut with slow zooms and shaking hands. One creator whispered, "That's how you end a man without raising your voice." And Jasmine? She stayed offline. Her comms team answered no calls. The only thing she posted was a black screen with white text. Still not being small. 12 words, no hashtags. Didn't need them. Because this wasn't just a viral clip. It was a shift. A case study in restraint. A masterclass in exposure. And a reminder that some power doesn't shout. It just arrives. Unbothered. Undeniable. Unforgettable. This story was brutal. But this story on the right-hand side is even more insane.